The text wasn't meant for me. That's what makes it so perfectly, exquisitely cruel. It was a grenade tossed carelessly into the wrong foxhole, and I was the one left holding the smoking pieces. My future daughter-in-law, Callista, with her shellacked blonde bob and a smile that never quite warmed her eyes, had meant to send it to her mother, Anthea. But her thumb, likely slick with expensive hand cream, slipped, and the truth, in all its vile, unvarnished glory, landed in my message thread. I read it on the bench in my own backyard, surrounded by the peonies I'd nurtured from bulbs. The words didn't just sit on the screen, they vibrated with a malicious energy. Mom, finalizing the shower list. We have to uninvite Marnie. She's become too embarrassing. At the engagement party, she spent 20 minutes telling your book club about vermicomposting. She showed up with literal dirt under her nails. She wears those loud floral prints that look like a couch from 1987. My friends from the junior league are already whispering. She'll ruin the aesthetic. We'll do a separate quiet brunch with her afterward. Damage control. Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in Australia, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. My name is Marnie Vesta. I'm 68 years old, a widow for 12, and my life is this 2-acre patch of earth on the outskirts of Sterling Oaks, a suburb where every shingle is perfect and every SUV is a neutral shade. I'm the blot of vibrant color in a grayscale painting. I thought it gave the place character. Callista thought it gave her hives. The phone grew heavy in my hand, the cheerful sunlight suddenly feeling like an interrogation lamp. I could see the 3 pulsing dots. She'd realized her mistake. The dots danced, then vanished. A coward's retreat. No apology, just the silent, echoing aftermath of a revealed truth. A separate, quiet brunch. Damage control. I was a contaminant to be contained. I looked at my hands, resting on my lap. The garden soil was indeed under my nails, a dark crescent moon of a life spent creating, not just curating. These hands had built tree houses for my son, Thaddeus. They'd held my husband, Leo, as cancer took him. They kneaded bread and pulled weeds and painted terrible, joyful watercolors. And they were an embarrassment. The pain was a physical squeeze in my chest, a hot, sharp thing behind my eyes. But then, as I stared at the riot of my untamed cottage garden, a colder, quieter feeling began to seep in. A resolve. The bridal shower was in 9 days. At the Glass Pavilion, a sterile modern venue Callista had chosen for its Instagrammable light, I was writing the check. A substantial check drawn from the careful savings Leo had left me, my contribution to my only child's happiness. I was the hostess on the invitation, a proud, smiling lie. I stood up, my bones protesting, and walked into my kitchen, a warm, cluttered space of drying herbs and mismatched mugs. I pulled the folded contract from the recipe box. My fingers traced the embossed letterhead. Then I picked up the phone and dialed. Camille, it's Marnie Vesta. Regarding the Thaddeus and Callista bridal shower next Saturday, I need to cancel it. The event coordinator's splutter was immediate, a rush of penalties and non-refundable deposits. I understand, I said, my voice eerily calm. Charge the full fee to the card on file. And Camille, do not call the bride or my son. I will handle all notifications. I hung up. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. I had just torpedoed the social event of Callista's season. I had burned a stack of money that represented years of frugality. But
As I looked at the text still glowing on my phone, I felt the first spark of something I hadn't felt in years, a fierce, unyielding dignity. The storm was coming. Let it come. The calm lasted about 3 hours, long enough for me to deadhead the roses, the rhythmic snip-snip, meditation. I was in the belly of the beast, the point of no return, and there was a strange freedom in it. Then, my son's name flashed on my screen. Not a text, a call. Thaddeus, my Teddy, the boy I'd raised to be kind, to be loyal, the man who was marrying Callista. I took a deep breath, the scent of damp earth and roses filling my lungs, and answered. Mom? His voice was tight, a violin string wound too far. What is going on? I just got a truly unhinged call from Callista. She says you canceled her bridal shower, that the glass pavilion called her to confirm the cancellation. Is this some kind of joke? I could picture him running a hand through his hair the way he always did when stressed, standing in the sleek, minimalist apartment Callista had decorated, all sharp edges and cold surfaces. It's not a joke, Teddy. Why? Mom, why would you do that? Do you have any idea what that venue cost?
The planning? Her friends have flights booked. This is insane. The word insane hung in the air, a little echo of Callista's embarrassing. I received a text from Callista today. It was meant for her mother. It explained that I was too embarrassing to attend the main shower, that I would ruin the aesthetic, that I was being relegated to a damage control brunch afterward. The line went so quiet I could hear the hum of his refrigerator a state away. She wouldn't say that. There must be a misunderstanding. I have the text, Thaddeus. Would you like me to read it to you, verbatim? More silence. This was the hard part. This was my boy, caught between the woman he loved and the mother who loved him. I ached for him, but I ached for myself too. Mom, listen, she's under a lot of pressure. Her mother, Anthea, is a lot. Callista just wants everything to be perfect. She didn't mean it like that. She meant every word, I said softly. And perfect shouldn't mean erasing people who don't fit the palette. I was happy to host her, to celebrate her. But I will not pay a small fortune to be hidden away like a family secret. I canceled the event I was bankrolling. If she wants a shower at the glass pavilion, Anthea can write the check. He let out a long, frustrated sigh. You put me in an impossible position. No, Thaddeus, I said, a crack finally appearing in my calm. She put you there. I'm simply refusing to stand in the corner she designated for me. I ended the call before I started to cry. The next 48 hours were a barrage. Calls from Anthea, whose voice was like chilled silk, dripping with faux concern and barely veiled threats about family harmony. Vague, furious texts from Callista's friends whose travel plans were now in disarray. I ignored them all. I watered my garden. I repotted ferns. I waited. The siege began on Tuesday morning. A sleek silver car I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway, crushing the loose gravel that lined it. Out stepped Anthea. She was a woman who looked like she'd been pressed between the pages of a very expensive, very boring book. Her outfit was a symphony of beige, her posture rigid. She surveyed my front yard, with its slightly peeling picket fence, and the wild clematis threatening to engulf the porch light, with the faint disdain of a health inspector. Marnie, she said,
offering a smile that didn't involve her eyes. "We need to talk. May I come in?"
I was in my painting smock, a splotchy canvas of old color. I didn't move from the porch swing. "We can talk right here, Anthea. The weather's fine." She perched gingerly on the edge of a wicker chair, as if it might soil her. "This situation has gotten out of hand. My daughter is devastated. The shower was very important to her." I'm sure it was. It was important to me, too, until I learned I was an unwanted guest at my own party. "Oh, that text." She waved a dismissive hand. "A moment of stress. You mustn't be so sensitive. Now, we need to discuss reinstating the event. Callista's reputation, her social standing." "Her social standing is not my concern," I said, cutting her off. Anthea's mask slipped. "This is about more than your feelings, Marnie. This is about family, about Thaddeus. Do you want to be responsible for starting his marriage off with this kind of strife over a silly misunderstanding?" She was using my son as a weapon, and it was a low, effective blow. "I think Callista and you have a very specific idea of what a family should look like. Quiet, decorative, and unobtrusive. I don't fit that mold. I won't apologize for it, and I certainly won't pay to be insulted. The discussion is over." I turned and walked into my house, closing the front door with a soft, definitive click. I watched through the window as she sat, stunned, for a full minute before storming back to her car. The first battle was won, but the war was just beginning. I knew they wouldn't give up. The money was one thing. The principle, my defiance, was what they couldn't abide. The silence from Thaddeus was the worst. The angry calls I could handle. The silent treatment from my own son was a fresh wound every day. I busied myself with a new project, transforming the old potting shed at the back of my property. It had good bones, with a wide doorway and a window that looked onto the birch grove. I swept out decades of dust, washed the windows, and dragged in an old, comfortable armchair. I hung up my most chaotic, colorful watercolors, explosions of poppies and impossible blue skies. This would be my sanctuary, my embarrassing little clubhouse. 4 days after the cancellation, as I was staining a small side table a vibrant cobalt blue, I heard a car door shut. Not the aggressive crunch of Anthea's visit. This was hesitant. I peered out. It was Thaddeus. He stood by his sensible sedan, looking at the house like it was a puzzle.
He was still my boy in that face, the one who used to chase fireflies here. My heart clenched. I walked out, wiping my hands on a rag. "Hey, Mom." He looked tired. "Hello, Teddy. Come to see the site of the crime?" He flinched. "Don't. Please, can we just talk?" I led him not into the tidy house, but to the bench under the old sugar maple. We sat in the dappled shade. "I've been talking to Callista and Anthea," he began. "I'm sure you have. They're really upset. Anthea is refusing to pay to rebook the pavilion. She says it's your mess to fix." I let out a short laugh. "Of course she is." "Mom, this is tearing me apart." His voice broke. "I love you, but I'm marrying Callista. This is my life. Is there any way you could just apologize? Smooth this over for me?" He looked at me, his eyes pleading. This was the ask. To swallow the insult, apologize for my reaction, and likely write another check to make his life easier. The temptation was profound. To have my son back, his easy smile, his weekend visits. But at what cost? "Thaddeus," I said, my own voice thick,
If I apologize, I am saying her assessment of me was correct, that I am an embarrassing thing that should be quieter, smaller, cleaner. Is that what you believe?" He looked away, down at his hands. The silence was his answer. It wasn't a no. The pain of that was physical, a vice around my ribs. "I love you more than anything," I whispered. "But I can't apologize for existing, not even for you." He stood up abruptly, nodded once, a sharp, hurt motion, and walked back to his car without another word. I watched him go, the tears finally falling, watering the grass at my feet. It was the loneliest I'd felt since Leo died. A week passed. The date of the original shower came and went. I heard nothing. I imagined the frantic, whispered scrambling, the smaller, hastily arranged gathering at Anthea's no doubt impeccable home. I planted sunflowers. I baked a loaf of sourdough and didn't eat it. The fallout was a quiet, persistent ache. Then on a Sunday afternoon, an unexpected ally emerged. My next-door neighbor, Bastian. He was a retired history professor, a widower who kept to himself, usually seen puttering in his own neat, organized vegetable patch.
He ambled over the property line, holding a basket of early tomatoes. "Thought you might like these," he said, his voice a gentle rumble. "Heard you've been weathering a bit of a storm." I must have looked surprised. He gave a small shrug. "Sound carries over fences, and Anthea's voice, well, it has a certain projection." I managed a smile. We talked about tomatoes, about the stubborn groundhog, about everything except the elephant in the room. But his kindness was a balm. He saw my stained hands and brought me tomatoes. The world hadn't entirely gone mad. His quiet companionship was a stark contrast to the next development. I received a formal, legal-looking letter. It was from Anthea's attorney. It stated that, as I had willfully and maliciously breached a social contract and caused significant financial and reputational damages, they were considering legal action unless I reimbursed the full cost of the original shower, plus an additional sum for emotional distress. I read it twice, then started to laugh. A dry, brittle sound. They were suing me for uninviting myself from a party I was paying for. The absurdity was breathtaking. This was no longer about a party. This was a crusade to break me. I didn't call a lawyer. Instead, I went to my new sanctuary, the potting shed. I sat in the blue chair and looked out at the birches. What would Leo have done? He'd have been furious, a quiet, simmering rage. He'd have told me to stand my ground, but he also would have had a plan. I needed a plan, not a reaction, but an action. I couldn't fight them on their terms, lawyers, social maneuvering, cold, hard cash. I had to fight on mine. I looked at my hands, at the paint and soil. This was my territory, my home, my life. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one, but it would be fought with seeds and bread and stubborn, unwavering love. I picked up my phone and made a call, not to a lawyer, to the local community center.
"Marnie Vesta," I said to the coordinator, a warm-voiced woman named Cora, "I'd like to sponsor a weekly community gardening and art afternoon for seniors at the Sterling Oaks Community Center. I'll cover the materials. I'll lead it." I explained my vision, a no-judgment space where people could get their hands dirty potting plants, trying a watercolor, sharing stories, a place where loud prints and dirty nails were a badge of honor, not a social failing. Cora was thrilled. Sterling Oaks had money, but it often lacked heart. This, she said, was just what they needed. I called it the Flourish Hour. I used the money I'd saved, not for a lawyer, but for soil, clay pots, cheap canvases, and watercolor sets. My first act of defiance was not a lawsuit, but an invitation to joy. The first session was the following Thursday. I was terrified. What if no one came? What if they did, and I truly was an embarrassing, rambling old woman? I set up tables in the sunny activity room, laid out pots of soil and trays of cheerful pansies. At 10 o'clock, the door opened. Bastien walked in, giving me a nod. Then Mrs. Gable from 2 streets over, who I knew was recently widowed. Then a few others, men and women I recognized from the library or the grocery store, their faces curious, hesitant. Soon there were 12 of us. I showed them how to gently loosen the roots of the pansies. I talked about light, about water. I didn't mention worm farms, not yet. The room was quiet at first, just the rustle of foliage and the scratch of terracotta. Then, slowly, conversations sparked about grandchildren, about a recipe, about the annoying new traffic circle. Laughter, real and unself-conscious, bubbled up. As we cleaned up, Mrs. Gable took my hand. Her own were thin and veined. "Thank you, Marnie," she said, her eyes bright. "I haven't had this much fun in years. I felt useful." That word, useful, hit me harder than any insult from Anthea. I was building something, and word began to spread. The lawyer's letter sat on my kitchen table, a stark white threat against the warm wood. I hadn't responded. My silence, I knew, was its own kind of weapon to someone like Anthea. She expected drama, tears, capitulation. My focus on the Flourish Hour was a baffling, off-script move. Thaddeus called again, his voice hollow. Callista got the community center newsletter.
She saw your photo, leading some gardening club. He said it like I was running a fright ring. Mom, what are you doing? Are you trying to make this worse? I'm living my life, Thaddeus, happily. Is that what's making it worse? They're serious about the lawsuit, Mom. Anthea is livid. She says you're mocking them. By teaching old people to paint flower pots? Tell me, Teddy, does that sound like mockery to you? Or does it sound like something your mother would do? He had no answer. The chasm between us was no longer just about Callista. It was about who he was becoming and who he needed me to be to fit into that life. The call ended in a familiar, weary silence. The following week, at the Flourish Hour, a local reporter showed up. Cora, the coordinator, had submitted the program for a community spirit piece in the Sterling Sentinel. Her name was Priya, and she was young with intelligent eyes. She didn't just take a photo and leave. She stayed. She potted a fern. She asked questions, not the trite ones, but real ones. What made you start this, Marnie? I looked at the faces around the table, focused, smiling, relaxed. I think we spend a lot of time at our age being told to be quiet, to be less messy, I said carefully. This is a place where the mess is the point, where the growing and the creating never stop. Priya nodded, typing notes. The article came out 3 days later, with the beautiful photo of all of us, hands in the soil, laughing. The caption read, "Marnie Vesta's Flourish Hour proves it's never too late to grow." My phone buzzed with texts from people I barely knew, congratulating me. The community response was overwhelmingly positive. I was no longer just the embarrassing mother-in-law. I was a local feature. This was a narrative Anthea could not control. The counterattack was swift and petty.
A series of one-star reviews appeared on the community center's website and local forums. Waste of time. The instructor is unprofessional and disorganized. Left with dirt under my nails. Not what I expected for Sterling Oaks. They were anonymous, but the phrasing was telling. Disorganized. Dirt under nails. It was Callista's text, weaponized for public consumption. Cora called me, worried. Should we respond? This is so nasty. No, I said, feeling that cold resolve again. We don't respond to poison. We plant better seeds. At the next Flourish Hour, I didn't mention the reviews. I brought in a surprise. A local beekeeper, a robust woman named Hilda, who talked about pollinators and let us taste different honeys.
The session was a riot. The bad reviews were drowned out by a flood of new 5-star ones from the actual attendees. A jewel in our community. Marnie is a treasure. The attempt to sabotage me had backfired spectacularly, highlighting their malice and my community support. Then the wedding invitation arrived. It was pristine, thick cardstock, elegant script. It was addressed only to me, no and guest. A pointed exclusion of any potential partner, even a friendly one like Bastien. The date loomed, a mere 6 weeks away. It felt less like an invitation and more like a summons to the gallows. Was I expected to sit alone, a visible monument to the strife, while everyone whispered? To smile and watch my son marry the woman who found me so lacking? The pain was acute. I set the invitation on the mantel, next to a photo of Leo. I didn't know what to do. Going felt like surrender. Not going felt like abandoning my son. I was trapped. Bastien found me in the shed, staring at a blank canvas. The invitation came, I said, not turning around. I figured. He leaned against the doorway. What does your gut tell you? To run away to a cottage by the sea and never look back. And my heart? I finally looked at him. My heart is in pieces. It wants my son, but not the version of him that allows this cruelty. He nodded. You know, in history, the most powerful negotiations often happen from a position of strength, not desperation. You've built something strong here, Marnie. You have an army. He gestured back toward the house, the community. You don't have to go as a victim. You can go as yourself, unapologetically. And if they can't handle that, it's their loss, not yours. His words sunk in. He was right. Hiding or not going was a form of shame. Going and cowering was worse. I had to go as me. The full, loud, floral, dirt under my nails me. But I needed a plan. I needed armor. I called Priya, the reporter. Off the record, I said, can you tell me if there were any controversies around the funding for the glass pavilion or any zoning issues with Anthea's homeowners association? Priya was quiet for a moment. Let me make a call. She called back an hour later. The pavilion is clean, but Anthea's HOA has a pending complaint about an unsightly and unauthorized backyard sculpture installation, a modern art piece. It's a whole thing. A slow smile spread across my face. Anthea, the arbiter of taste, was in violation of her own community's aesthetic rules. It was a tiny thread, but sometimes that's all you need to start unraveling a tapestry. The wedding was at the Sterling Oaks Country Club, a place of manicured greens and hushed moneyed tones. I wore my most Marnie outfit, a vibrant silk dress patterned with bold poppies and emerald leaves. I did my own hair. I wore simple pearl earrings that had been Leo's mother's. My nails were clean, but my hands were my hands. Worked, capable, older. I arrived alone. I could feel the stares as I walked in.
a splash of color in a sea of champagne, navy, and blush. I saw Callista first, in a pre-ceremony robe, whispering furiously with Anthea near a grandiose floral arrangement. They both saw me. Their expressions froze, a perfect mask of shock and displeasure. I gave them a small, serene smile and found my seat. Not in the front row, but the second, a dignified distance. Thaddeus saw me as he took his place at the altar. His eyes went wide. He looked from me, in my defiant dress, to Callista, whose back was rigid. I saw the conflict on his face, the love, the frustration, the utter confusion. He gave me the tiniest, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. The ceremony was a blur of generic vows and perfect choreography. It felt like a performance. My heart ached for the boy who used to make up silly songs, not this stiff man in a tuxedo reciting lines. At the reception, I was seated at a table with distant cousins of Anthea's and a few of Thaddeus's more subdued colleagues. It was the miscellaneous table. The conversation was polite, brittle. I asked one of the colleagues about his work. He was an urban planner. We fell into a surprisingly deep conversation about green spaces and community design. I mentioned the Flourish Hour. His eyes lit up. "You run that? My mother does. She loves it. She said you've changed her whole outlook." The people at the table leaned in, curious. I was no longer just the mother of the groom. I was a person of interest. The dynamic shifted. The critical moment came during the speeches. Anthea gave a glowing, polished tribute to her daughter, subtly highlighting every achievement and connection. Then it was Thaddeus's turn. He thanked everyone, his voice tight. Then he said, "I want to thank my mom, Marnie, for everything." It was generic, safe, but his eyes found mine, and they were wet. He cleared his throat. "She taught me that the most beautiful things aren't always the most perfect, that real growth can be messy." The room was silent. Callista's smile was a grimace. Anthea looked like she'd swallowed a lemon.
It was a small rebellion, but it was his. For me. After the formalities, as people danced, I circulated. I talked to people. I was genuinely myself, asking questions, listening, laughing my too loud laugh. I could see the surprise on some faces, followed by warmth. The monster they'd been warned about was just a grandmother in a loud dress who knew a lot about perennials. I was winning, not by fighting, but by simply being present and unbroken. Then I saw my chance. I approached Anthea, who was holding court near the champagne fountain. "Anthea," I said, my voice pleasant. "Lovely wedding. The flowers are exquisite." "Anthea," her tone was arctic. "I see you decided to come." "I wouldn't have missed my son's wedding for the world," I said, my smile never wavering. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial level only she could hear. "By the way, I heard about the dreadful HOA business with your Henry Moore-esque sculpture. What a shame to have one's artistic vision constrained by such petty rules." Her face went parchment white. She knew. She knew I knew. It was a checkmate in a single move. I didn't need to threaten. The knowledge that I held a piece of her own imperfection was power enough. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," I said sweetly, and turned to leave. I left the reception early, slipping out as the party hit its peak. My work was done. I had shown up, I had been seen, I had not crumbled. I was driving home, the poppy dress glowing under the streetlights, when my phone rang. It was Thaddeus. "You're leaving?" he said, his voice thick, maybe from drink, maybe from emotion. Yes, Teddy. I'm tired. It was a beautiful wedding. Congratulations. Mom, wait. A long pause. I saw you talking to Anthea. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. What did you say? I simply admired her garden sculpture, I said lightly. He let out a choked laugh. Right. Silence again. Thank you for coming, for wearing that dress. His voice cracked. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for everything. It wasn't a full reckoning. It wouldn't fix it all overnight, but it was a start, a crack in the dam. I love you, Thaddeus, always. Go be with your wife. I hung up and cried the rest of the way home, but they were clean tears, tears of release. The next morning, I was in my garden when Bastien wandered over with 2 mugs of coffee. Survived? He asked. Thrived, I corrected, taking a mug. We sat on the bench. The silence was comfortable. For the first time in months, I felt peace, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of a deep certainty. I was who I was. That was enough. A few days later, a check arrived in the mail. From Anthea. It was for the full, original amount of the bridal shower, plus a little extra. The note was terse. Consider the matter closed. No lawsuit, no more letters. I had called her bluff, and she had folded. I endorsed the check over to the community center to fund the Flourish Hour for the next 2 years. Life settled into a new rhythm. The Flourish Hour flourished with a waiting list. Thaddeus began calling weekly, tentative at first, then more relaxed. He didn't mention Callista much, and I didn't ask. He started asking for gardening advice for his new balcony. A tiny, precious bridge was being rebuilt, plank by careful plank. One Saturday, he showed up at my door, alone. He looked younger, less pinched. "Can I help with something?" he asked, gesturing to the garden. We spent the afternoon weeding the vegetable patch, talking about nothing and everything. It was awkward, then easy, then familiar. He left with a basket of tomatoes and a hug that felt real. My story, it seemed, had a ripple effect. Other women in the community in Bolden started their own groups, a knitting circle, a memoir writing workshop. Sterling Oaks was getting its heart, one messy, joyful gathering at a time. Bastien became a regular fixture, helping me build a proper greenhouse extension to the shed. Our friendship was a quiet, steady thing, full of shared silences and mutual respect. I wasn't lonely. I was surrounded by my plants, my community, by a quiet man who brought me tomatoes and didn't flinch at my loud laugh. A year to the day after the canceled shower, I hosted my own event. Not a shower, a harvest hoedown in my backyard. I strung fairy lights in the trees, dragged out picnic tables, and made vast pots of soup and loaves of bread. I invited everyone. My Flourish Hour regulars, Cora from the community center, Priya the reporter, Bastien, neighbors, and yes, Thaddeus. I didn't invite Callista or Anthea. This was my world. Thaddeus came, looking nervous, but determined. He helped me carry the bread outside. The yard was full of noise, laughter, people mixing and talking. Music played. Not a string quartet, but folk music. Thaddeus watched it all. The vibrant, slightly chaotic, deeply happy scene. He saw Mrs. Gable teaching a retired judge how to paint a gourd. He saw Bastien and me sharing a smile over the punch bowl. He saw me in my element, loved not in spite of who I was, but because of it. At one point, he pulled me aside. "This is incredible, Mom. It's just life, Teddy. The messy, wonderful kind." He nodded, his eyes shining. I'm starting to remember why I liked that kind better. It was the closest he'd come to criticizing the world he'd chosen. It was enough. 2 years later, I'm in my greenhouse, the one Bastien and I built. It's warm and humid, smelling of soil and green growth. I'm repotting orchids, my hands once again blissfully dirty.
Through the glass, I see Thaddeus's car pull up. He gets out, but he's not alone. A little girl about 3 with riotous curls tumbles out after him. My granddaughter, Juniper. Callista is not with them. The marriage, I learned through careful, non-prying questions from Thaddeus, had quietly unraveled. The pressure to be perfect, it seemed, was a heavy weight for both parties to bear. Thaddeus lifts Juniper up, pointing to the greenhouse. Her eyes go wide. He walks toward me. I open the door, and the smell of the garden wafts out. Juniper, Thaddeus says, his voice full of a love I recognize. This is your grandma Marnie. She's going to show you how to make things grow. The little girl looks at my hands, at the soil, then at my face. She doesn't see embarrassment. She sees curiosity, wonder. She reaches out a small hand and touches a velvety petal of an orchid. Pretty, she whispers. Yes, my darling, and so are you. Now, how would you like to get your hands a little dirty? I glance at Thaddeus. He is smiling, a real, easy, full smile I haven't seen since he was a boy. He gives me a nod. Juniper eagerly holds out her hands. I guide her little fingers into the pot, helping her pat the soil around the roots. Her hands, tiny and new, are soon smudged with the rich, dark earth, a perfect match for my own. We are a picture, the 3 of us, in that sun-drenched greenhouse, a cycle of love, growth, and forgiveness, literally getting our hands dirty together. The past, with its hurts and humiliations, hasn't vanished, but it's been composted, turned over, and from it, something unexpectedly beautiful has begun to grow. I am not embarrassing. I am the gardener, and this, finally, is my harvest. If this story resonated with you, please don't hesitate to like this video and subscribe to this channel so we can share more with each other. Please leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from.